Okay, everyone, welcome back. Luke, I just want to make sure for y'all's benefits, I'm using this screen, that's my PowerPoint. You all have that as a hard copy, so if you're having a difficult time seeing what's on the screen, I want to lecture to you about that, but just follow on your hard copy, your PowerPoint, so that's where I'm at. So I'm on the PowerPoint entitled Stimulus. I think the last time I covered hallucinogenic drugs, and now we're going to move on to the second category the author covers as stimulants. So stimulant drugs are drugs that increase activity in the central nervous system. So you're looking for examples or systems that would increase the heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature, energy level. But a real good test taking tip is that you'll know a person is on a stimulant if you see some of those symptoms, and then the one thing that decreases is their appetite. So most all stimulants have a depressant feature to them when it comes to appetite control. So I've listed a few examples of caffeine, nicotine, amphetamine, cocaine. One that's not listed up here that you might make a note of, you'll definitely be asked about it, is ecstasy, MDMA. We'll get to that in a minute. So let's go through a few of these and see what the symptoms are and so on. So the first one is tobacco, cigarette smoking, if you will, nicotine, especially among young people. The number one reason given that young people say is that they were introduced to smoking by a peer. So peer influence is extremely powerful when it comes to beginning cigarette smoking. If you're asked by age, around 13 to 15 years of age, if you're asked by year in school, somewhere around the middle school kids, the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, that population. Also try to remember, I said that sometimes the question is about the number one use or the drug of choice. This one you're going to look for on a daily basis is the key, whereas alcohol is binge drinking. Marijuana is as they have access to it, but it's an illicit substance. But we're back now to legal substance as far as our society is concerned, but it's the number one use on a daily basis. And so some of the other information is that while it had an increase in the 90s, we've seen a decrease since then in cigarette use. And again, this is the general population of young people. The high-risk group, probably not decreasing, but the general population, according to the records, the statistics, they show that the use of cigarette smoking among young people is decreasing. The reasons given is it's cost prohibitive, very expensive, and second, the effectiveness of some of the advertisement to try to get young people to not smoke. So they feel like those campaigns are working. Another substance listed under stimulants is cocaine. Again, pay attention to substances that are either organic or synthetic, but the truth of the matter is anything that's organic, eventually it has synthetics added to it, chemicals of some sort, and that's no different than cocaine. But basically, it comes from the coca plant grown in South America. The leaves are shredded from the plant, they're crushed, and they become a paste-like. Then they're brought into a lab in which then all these chemicals are introduced. From that is what we know as a kilo, a brick of cocaine. Well, you can take that, and if you take it in that form, and you can see the little picture here, look at your PowerPoint, if you look at it, they can sift that. They'll take something like a razor blade, the edge of a credit card or something, and they'll continue to chop at it until it's in a powder-like form. And so this was really the first and most common use of it was snorted. Be sure you can answer any of the three in the order in which I've given them to you. So snorting it directly or inhaling it directly in the powder form was how it was originally used. It wasn't too long after that, other people want to experiment around with it, and they found that if they could heat it up a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, it could be in a liquid form, and then they could pull it into a syringe and then inject it directly into the veins to get a more powerful high. The third form, they push the envelope, if you will, on heating up the cocaine past the point of liquid and try to vaporize it, try to convert it to a vapor so that they could inhale it or smoke it. That was called freebasing. The problem with that is when you heat it to that level, it is flammable, and before it would vaporize, it could explode, and so it was found to be very dangerous. So they moved away from the freebasing for a while, but then some people came back in and they started looking at it and they started put it back into the paste form, reintroducing some chemicals or ingredients that can neutralize the flammables. And now, of course, what you have is once it was put in the paste form, they cut it into what they call cookies. That gets baked. The cookies then become what we know as crack cocaine. And then it's broken into what we call rock, and that is smoked. It makes a crackling noise, and it's extremely addictive. Any form is addictive, but the crack is especially powerful and very addictive, or as you know in the chapter, physical dependence forms very quickly. The stimulant hits you very quickly, and it also drops off very quickly. So the person is always chasing after another high. Another drug in this category is the amphetamines. What I would keep in mind if you're reading a scenario on a test and you're looking for, well, what substance should I pick? You're going to pick an amphetamine, one or two reasons, or either both. One is an energy boost, a quick boost of energy to stay awake, stay alert, or to lose weight. So as a diet pill, or and what they call an upper or a pet pill. What they have found is among the high school population, it was become very popular among female high school students, showing that 40% of girls senior year of high school said that within the last 30 days they used some form of an amphetamine, primarily to lose weight, not necessarily to get high, but to lose weight. The problem with that is, of course, depending on your reaction to the stimulant and how hard it hits the system, some young people were having problems with their heart rate accelerating, and they felt like they were having a heart attack, and some were finding themselves in the emergency rooms. Before I go to the category of depressants, I want to remind you that I'm also going to ask you about ecstasy. The drug ecstasy is listed under the depressant drugs. Ecstasy, the technical name is MDMA. Generally speaking, young people consider it to be a harmless substance because when they take it, they report that they have a good time. It's a fun high. Everybody's happy. Nobody's mad or angry, and so on. But the problem with the ecstasy, two things, make note. One is that you develop a tolerance very quickly. So go back to your notes when I first started this section on tolerance. It takes a greater amount of a substance to create the same effect. So when they started this, one tablet might have given them the euphoric feeling that they were looking for. Then they wait, they don't feel it, they'll take a second, sometimes a third, and by the time it kicks in, then their heart is racing, and some people actually do end up in the emergency room. The second problem with ecstasy is that you can't sit still. You have this tremendous amount of energy, so these young people go to these rave parties, they dance, they're up, they're loud, they're out and about, they're just not resting, and so they perspire, they deplete their fluids, and they can go into a heat stroke. Their electrolytes are out of balance and they collapse. And so there's some real problems associated with it that the young people just are unaware of. Now, like I told you, three categories: the hallucinogenic, the stimulant we just finished, and then the third category is depressants. So obviously if the stimulant increases activity in the central nervous system, the depressants are going to decrease activity in the central nervous system, meaning all of those same things I told you, like the heart rate and pulse and those things that were accelerated are now going to start shutting down. And so as a person ingests depressants, they're going to begin moving more slowly, their speech will be slurred, and so on. You become drowsy, sleepy, and could even go into a coma depending on the level. It can get so bad, like with heroin, that your heart can just stop beating completely. Well, I've already covered the subject of alcohol. Just remember that it is in this category of depressant substances. The other thing to be careful of in this particular section under depressants is that there's discussion over illicit drugs, meaning prescription drugs, and then illicit drugs, meaning the street drugs like the heroin and so on. So first off, your author talks about some of the illicit drugs, prescription medication. And by the way, so I don't forget, let me just say now, if you're asked what is the #1 reason kids say or explanation of how they get their hands on prescription drugs, it's in the home, in the medicine cabinet, something that a parent themselves has a prescription for, and the kids are bringing it to school and or trading it with other kids. #1 reason the kids say they have either share it or get it from other kids, comes from the home. Anyway, all right, so let's look at some of these listed. The first one is barbiturates. So the scenario or the example, I always tell you, this person goes to the doctor and complains of insomnia. They're having a difficult time sleeping, and so it is very likely that the doctor would prescribe a barbiturate, which is common name, just a sleeping pill. And so like Nebutol, Seconal. And so primarily they're designed to induce sleep, and the secondary benefit is you get a good night's sleep, then hopefully your stress level goes down, you wake up more refreshed and feeling better. The problem with these drugs, of course, is that you can develop physical dependence or addiction to them fairly quickly, and therefore when you are not taking them, you're going to experience the withdrawal symptoms that I talked to earlier in the chapter when I covered those terms. Now another illicit drug or prescription medication, the scenario would change a little bit, and in this case the person goes to the doctor not complaining about insomnia but complaining about anxiety, stress. They're overwhelmed, they have things going on in their life, they feel that their life is spinning out of control, and they want something to help them, to calm their nerves, something to help them cope. And so it is likely in this case that the doctor would prescribe a tranquilizer. And so in this case, you're looking at the primary benefit of a tranquilizer would be to reduce the anxiety. And the secondary would be, if they're not as stressed out, hopefully they would get a good night's sleep, and that would also be a benefit of taking a tranquilizer. So it's just a paragraph, read on it, and it's the same system that I told you a minute ago as far as how it works. You're going to get addicted to these if you're not careful, and so that can be a real problem. Continuing with the subject of depressants, we move over to the illicit drugs in this category, and that's the opiates. Now I want to be careful here because in this category you also have morphine, which isn't necessarily an illicit drug. Morphine is used as a prescription, but generally speaking, when we talk about the opiates, we're talking about what people call narcotics. And so the heroin, morphine, codeine, this category of drugs are pretty potent drugs, and they're very powerful depressants on the system. They're originally found to be extremely effective painkillers. And so that's what made them popular to begin with, but unfortunately they were extremely addictive. And so when people are prescribed, let's say a drug for pain, the Oxycontins and so on, and then they can't get the prescription, and or it gets too expensive, then they're going to turn to these street drugs, especially heroin. And once they're addicted to the heroin, it's extremely potent as far as repetitive, looking for their next heroin hit. Now, the thing about these particular drugs, you're going to develop a tolerance very, very quickly. So it's going to take a lot more of the drug to get the same effect that you had originally. And the reason that people are very reluctant to get help with these drugs is because the withdrawal is extremely painful and they have to go to detox before they can actually go to a treatment facility, and they already know what that feels like when they can't get their heroin to begin with. And so they really it's a difficult population to get them to go and get help. Like I said earlier, make sure you pay attention if the drug is synthetic or organic. The heroin comes from the opium plant, primarily grown in Afghanistan, smuggled in through Mexico. There is beginning to see some increase in South America that they're starting to grow the plants there. A little sap is cut from the bulb of the plant, that's extracted, and that is what's smuggled in as heroin. And I think most people know heroin is going to be, when it's reheated, it will get in a liquid form, injected into the veins. When the veins collapse, they'll just start injecting it anywhere in the body. What they are also finding out is that a lot of young people are taking it. They'll just take a piece of tin foil, take a cigarette lighter, heat it up, and they will inhale the vapors, thinking that that's not as dangerous as the injecting into the veins and so on. But actually it is, and they get just as addicted to it as if they were injecting. Okay, I'm going to stop there, and the next time I will review some of the risk factors associated with all of the drugs I talked about today. Don't forget to work on your movie assignments.